Let's go ahead and open up with prayer, shall we? Abba, Father, in the name of Yeshua, we just want to bless you and thank you for this Sabbath day, bringing us here together again to look at your word, to seek your presence, to seek your spirit, to seek a greater understanding of what your word is saying for us. Not only back what was happening to them at their time, but what it means for us today. Because today we're dealing with so much opposition in this world as they were back then. And it's just wrapped a little bit differently. But what I'm asking, Abba, is that for each of us that you open up our minds and our hearts to understand exactly what the Word is saying and how it's relevant for us today. Because we are in a war. When we get baptized in Yeshua, whether we understand it or not, and I find so many people don't understand that they actually are declaring war on the kingdom of darkness. Yet so many people don't even really realize that they're in a war. But we are in a war. We're in a war and a battle for our minds, our hearts, our soul, and our spirit, and what we believe in and what we don't believe in. And the enemy is coming at your people, Abba, with so many different philosophies. And I just pray, Yahweh, that you help your people to open up and get a look at what's really going on in their lives so that they can be effective in waging the war against the kingdom of darkness and become victorious in the process. And that the power of the signs, wonders, and miracles will follow what they speak out of their mouth. So we just want to thank you and praise you, Yahweh, for the kind of delegated authority that you've given to us in Yeshua HaMashiach. And we pray, Yahweh, you'll do that for the rest of the brethren around the world as they come to you on this holy day. In Yeshua's mighty name, amen. Amen. All right, so last time we had concluded chapter 1 of Colossians finally. Where did it go?
Can you give a testimony?
Okay, give a testimony. It's out of script, but go ahead and give the testimony. I don't want to get nervous, you know. Go ahead.
No, just really quick. It's really simple. Just that the Facebook group that I have with the Torah observant moms. This whole week I've been getting personal messages and even women posting on for everybody to see that they're really, really, really happy and grateful for the group because there's such peace and harmony and between everybody that talks, and they find that in all the other groups that's lacking, and they're just so grateful. Like a woman even wrote that she went back months. She's like, there's no arguments, there's no nothing. She's like, I'm just so thankful I found the group, because everybody, I try and promote conversation, because then what happens is in a lot of other groups, you can't conversate about certain topics, because then people jump on you or whatever. We always talk, there's always sometimes I see it this way, I see it that way, but everybody usually just does it without fighting. Right. For the most part. There was one time that something happened, but it was because the lady was promoting not to keep Yom Kippur and Yom Teruah, that we don't have to because we're Melchizedek order now. So, and then, I'm like, you can't do that. That's anti-Torah stuff, you can't do that here. But other than that, and so I've been getting personal messages from all these women, and they've been posting it, so I'm just sort of happy, just letting you guys know I'm sort of happy because, that's what I wanted. That's been my prayer from day one, that it would be a place where moms can come and talk about any subject, not limiting it to anything specific, and where they could feel just unity, So.
I thought that was going to be the short version. I'm just kidding. Okay. Well, it's like I said to her, she was very frustrated with the other group she was in because there's a lot of infighting and tearing down each other. And I said, if you don't like it, go out and build your own stadium and draw the kind of people that you want. And that's my philosophy here, is I got tired of all the fellowships out there, fighting and, corrupt leaderships and all kinds of unclean spirits in these places. I said, that's it, I had enough. Either I'll stay home by myself or I'll set something up, and Yahweh will have to bring people. And so far, thankfully, you've all been pretty good. You've tolerated my foolishness and listened to some of the things that I said. And you guys are bearing fruit in your life. And I'm really appreciative of you guys sharing the testimonies of things that you're going through, because it rejuvenates me as well. Partially so with the Colossians, but not completely. So last time when we concluded chapter 1 of Colossians, basically the summary of this was that what Shaul was talking about was demonstrating our power over the enemy. In other words, we have the delegated authority from the kingdom to be able to have the kind of power and authority over the kingdom of darkness that the Colossians didn't quite understand. I don't think they even still got it after that, even though he told them face to face. But the other thing that we covered too, which I don't have here, is the fact that this was all done as part of the mystery of Messiah from the foundation of the world. And it was hidden from everybody, this mystery. Even the demons didn't know that what this mystery was until it was revealed through the apostles, as Shaul was talking about in the text. And so what he is saying is what our job is to be able to walk in this power and authority in our lives to the point that we demonstrate to the unclean spirits, to the kingdom of darkness, that you no longer are afflicting me. I'm now walking into your realm and I'm overthrowing the kingdom of darkness. Just as Yeshua did, because if he lives in us, then we have that same authority. Just like Tammy was saying, today is like the first real day that she got this shalom peace about the Sabbath, because things in her family are starting to turn around. Her husband is starting to turn a new leaf. And it's like Yahweh just imbued this shalom peace, which means the kingdom of darkness has to start moving out. That's what it's about. That's what it's about, taking charge by praying, fasting, whatever it is, seeking Yahweh to break this stronghold that I have in my family so that I can have this shalom peace that surpasses all understanding. The other thing that Shaul covered was, he gave the example of King David about how he went into the temple with his men and took the showbread. And the showbread in Hebrew literally means the bread of presence. I didn't cover this last week, but briefly what I'll do is I'll say this bread was leavened bread. It was loaves of bread, which represented the 12 tribes of Israel. And so on the day of preparation, which is on Fridays, the priest would make fresh 12 loaves of bread to put on on the table, and the bread of presence. And so what this symbolized was that the fact that the 12 tribes of Israel would come and present themselves on the Sabbath, every single Sabbath. So the bread that was made yesterday that's for today, which is like us, we're part of the 12 tribes of Israel. We come and we present ourselves as the 12 tribes on the Sabbath day as those loaves of bread. Of course, we're de-leavened now. We don't have leavened bread because we got the unleavened bread that came down from heaven, which is Yeshua. However, the bread that you had last Sabbath is not appropriate for the next Sabbath that's coming. Because in the Torah, that would be called bread that's called common bread. So the bread that they made yesterday, which is for today, next Sabbath will be called common and is not holy. It's not set apart. That's why David and his men were able to take that bread and it wouldn't defile themselves. However, metaphorically, or the shadow picture of this is that when we come today as the unleavened bread from heaven and present ourselves on the Sabbath, it's holy and it's sanctified. But if next week the Sabbath comes and you decide not to present yourself on that Sabbath, you can't use the bread from this week to cover you for the next week when you're not going to show up. And that's the shadow picture of what the bread of presence is. You are commanded to be present. And you don't have excuses to say, well, I think I'm going to run out and go do something else on the Sabbath this next week. And think that somehow because you came this week on the Sabbath, that it will cover you for the infraction you're going to cause next week. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. And we've got to rise to that next level. So anyway, that's something I wanted to share that I had forgot about last week. So let's go ahead and start on chapter 2, verse 1. And it says, "For I want you to know what a great conflict with anxiety I have for you and those in Laodicea, and for as many as have not seen my face in the flesh." So this conflict is breeding anxiety inside Shaul. And the anxiety, I think, probably is because he is not there to see them physically. He's writing these letters, okay? and they're being conveyed to these congregations. And so the anxiety is, imagine you're in Shaul's position where you're helping to groom these fellowships, but at the same time you've got all these peripheral groups that you know are taking advantage of the fact that you're not there, that Shaul is not there in the fellowships protecting the sheep. And they're coming in and they're hurling all kinds of doctrinal stuff at the Colossians and carrying them away. And so you got all this anxiety that's going on inside Shaul because he's not there to be able to protect them, and he has to try to convey these problems through these letters. So this is what's going on. So by this time, Colossae, the fellowship of Colossians, was beginning to dwindle as a city and was being taken over by the Laodiceans. Interesting note that when you read in Revelations chapter 2 and chapter 3, you don't see a letter to the Colossians, because the book of Revelation was revealed to John on Patmos right around 95 AD. By the time you get to 95 AD, Colossae had pretty much vanished as a city, and it got gobbled up by Laodicea. But the two of them, characteristically wise, were very similar, and they basically got conglomerated as one group as Laodicea, and that's probably why you don't see a letter to Colossae in chapter 2 or chapter 3. Interesting note here, Laodicea comes also from a word called dike, or dike, actually, is how it's pronounced. And it means judgment, punished, and vengeance. I did a little bit of a morphology on dike. I didn't get time to go into it too deep, but we have a terminology today that we call dike that refers to lesbians. And it comes from a Greek mythological thing. I forgot what it is. Forgive me, I don't remember what it is. And I can't help but to wonder if this word has morphed through the ages from this Greek mythology. But basically, what it comes down to, what I really want to get to, is Laodicea comes from judgment, punishment, and vengeance. And if we go back, and we'll take a look at it now actually, let's look at Revelation chapter 3, verse 14 through 19. It says, "And to the angel of the church of Laodiceans write these things, says the Amen, the faithful and the true witness, the beginning of the creation of Yahweh. I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold, such as chili," in other words, really chilly, "or hot to the point of boiling." I want one of two extremes. "So then, because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich and have become wealthy and have need of nothing, of occupation or business." Now, if you were here when I went through the beginning of Colossians, I went through the history of the city. I went through where they came from, what kind of people they were. They were basically on a trade route. They dealt a lot with like skins of sheep and goats, and they were a pretty wealthy city. It's really kind of amazing that they wound up drying up. But they were very wealthy people. They were doing very well. So it only makes sense that when he's saying here, you have need of nothing, which is of occupation or business, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, like a pauper, blind, both physically and mentally, and naked. I counsel or recommend you to buy from me gold refined, which is tried to the point of glowing in fire, that you may be rich, and white with garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed. So what I'm getting out of this is, and I know it to be true in my own life, there are things in my life that I'm not proud of, even till today. Every day I probably do something that is not very righteous. I'm not proud of it. But Yahweh, in His mercy and compassion, chooses not to expose it to all of you. Now, I should not take advantage of that and use it as a license to go and do more stuff, thinking that somehow I'm going to get away with it. And I'm sure all of you guys got spots and blemishes as well that Yahweh chooses not to do, because I believe that as long as you're trying to walk in righteousness and you're trying to be a chaste bride, you're trying to do the right thing, He sees your heart. There's no need to expose that. He'll work it out of us over time. But it's when we are walking in the opposite direction, in unrighteousness, then there comes a point where that covering gets lifted and you are being exposed for some of the things that you're hiding in secret. In other words, to render as apparent. so that everybody will see it for exactly what it is. And anoint with oil your eyes with eye salve, which I found this to be interesting. Eye salve is made with what's called Phrygian stone powder. So they take a Phrygian stone and they grind it till it becomes a powder, and then they mix it with olive oil. And and they mix it with some spices and things like that as well. And it's actually a form of medication that heals. You can put it on wounds, put it in your ears. If you got ear problems, you can put it on your eyes. That's what it's talking about. But I find what's interesting is that it has olive oil in it. And olive oil is symbolic of the Ruach HaKodesh. Okay? And so he's speaking metaphorically, but what he's basically saying is, your eye, you need to get back in touch with the Ruach HaKodesh, the anointing of the Spirit, so that your eyes can see properly spiritual matters of where you're in trouble. And so when you are in this state of condition, you don't have the anointing because you're so busy with your business, you're so busy with money, you're so busy with the cares of this world, to the point that it's squeezing out all this spiritual stuff and it's taking a back seat to it, that you may be able to see. In verse 19, it says, as many as I love, I rebuke and chasten, which is to educate through discipline. To educate through discipline. And those of us who accept the discipline that we get in our lives, the chastening, if we endure it with patience, it yields fruit that Yahweh likes. And then therefore what happens is your tree gets pruned back. But if any of you have ever done pruning, you'll know that when the new season comes around, you get a lot more shoots and branches that come out, which then produce even more fruit. But there are so many of us that are against the pruning process, through the chastening process that Yahweh is putting us through, because He wants to see more fruit. Instead, we're bucking, we're fighting, we're arguing. As my daughter was saying, people are fighting against one another on these chat rooms and stuff. And it's because they're so busy walking in the flesh, they don't have the eye salve on their eyes to get back in touch with the Ruach HaKodesh, to walk in the Spirit and not be walking in this flesh. And that's what so many people are doing, and they're destroying themselves in the process. Therefore, be zealous with feelings of passion. So what he's saying is you need to put eye salve on. You need to get back into connection with the Ruach HaKodesh so that you can see things spiritually. And when you get the impartation of seeing things spiritually, you then feel this enormous amount of faith inside you that should build a strong passion. And it should be the kind of passion that will prevent you from falling backwards again. That you'll say, I'll never, ever, ever let myself get into that predicament again. I never, ever want to sink that low till I get to the point that I can't feel anymore. It's like a bad marriage when a husband and wife are fighting so much and in such much disagreement with one another to the point that they can't feel anything for one another. That's a bad place to be. And that's the way it is when we as the bride, the betrothed bride of Messiah, get to the point where we let ourselves fall down so badly to the point that we can't even feel for Him anymore. That's really, really bad. We should never allow ourselves to get that far. And we must be on guard with it at all times. So back to continuing in the book of Colossians, now in verse 2, that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit through unifying together in love. So the encouragement comes through the unifying together in love. That's one of my main focuses here. It's like Pedro said last week. He says, if you want to look for something wrong in me, you can find a lot of stuff. Okay? But, the thing is if that's what we're going to focus on, then we're going to have a fellowship that has a lot of infighting going on. So, looking for the wrong in a person should be the exception to the rule. It should not be the rule. Because otherwise your life just becomes a battle. Mercy is the weightier matter of the law. That's what we got to do. To him who extends much mercy is returned to that person. And so let's move on. And attaining to all riches that include wealth of a full assurance, which includes the full confidence of understanding, of full mental intelligence, to the knowledge with full discernment of the mystery through religious rites or a religious initiation. When we came into this faith in Yeshua, we went through a form of initiation. And the devil saw to it that you were initialized into this faith. Because you don't come into this faith with some level of opposition from the enemy, because he doesn't want you coming into this faith. And as you come through that opposition, you go through a ritual or rites as you progress and you conquer the devil each step of the way, and you still pursue Yeshua anyway. And as you go through that, you start to learn things about this faith that you did not learn before going through those rituals. So that's what he's getting at. Of Yahweh, both of the Father and of the Messiah. Verse 3, in whom are hidden all the treasures, a deposit of wealth. So you have a deposit inside of you, every one of you, in the seed that you have, a deposit was deposited there of wealth. Now it's about growing in this faith to the point where the prosperity of this gospel begins to come in, manifests itself in your life, one step at a time, one level at a time, one miracle at a time. Not all at once, but one step at a time. Of wisdom from a higher spiritual source and knowledge. Now this I say, lest anyone should deceive or delude you with persuasive, which is enticing words. And man, is there so many people out there right now who are very well spoken, much better than I, not that I'm anything, but they got a way of turning on the juice and making an argument that's erroneous in nature sound so compelling, so strong, and it makes so much sense. And that's why I'm covering these books of Galatians and Colossians. We'll go into others later, because the same thing that was going on then is going on now. So many people are being deluded by very crafty people who are taking writings that are exterior from the Scriptures and bringing them in as if they are gospel, and people are being carried away left and right, and then they're fighting with each other. The bottom line is that when one who comes, the Elijah who comes in the spirit of John the Baptist, he will restore all things. When it comes to the calendar and all the other things, eventually he's going to be the one who will set the standard, and we'll all fall in alignment with that. For now, for us to argue over these things is fruitless. And I think we should stay away from some of that stuff. For though I am absent in the flesh, yet I am with you in spirit, rejoicing to see your good order, which the order means character at this time. So in other words, what he's saying is the reports that I'm getting back from about your congregation is that I see your good order or your character at that present time. Now that means it can change after that. So that's what that word order means. And the steadfastness of your faith in Messiah. Verse 6, as you therefore have received Messiah, Yeshua the Master, so walk in Him. So what is Shaul saying? Let's not lose focus of what the purpose of this letter is. The purpose of this letter is these external groups, which I went through extensively in the book of Galatians, are coming in and they're trying to subvert the Colossians like they did the Galatians and carry them away by altering the interpretation of what is the righteousness of Yeshua. At the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to. There's a lot of different arguments in here, but that is the basic argument. They believe that the righteousness of Yeshua is not enough by itself. Instead, we need to take these other beliefs from these other philosophies, which is the covenant of Hagar, and mix it with Yeshua's righteousness, and now you have everything that you need. So this is why Shaul is making this statement. As you therefore have received Messiah, Yeshua the Master, so walk in Him. So in other words, before all these other clowns came around, and they're trying to spin a different story about Messiah, at the moment you heard Messiah, and you accepted Him, and that righteousness was imputed to you at that moment, walk in Him in that way. Not what these guys are coming at you afterwards. Don't let them alter the original Messiah that was offered to you when you heard the word. Verse 7, rooted to the point of stability. So here he is again. He's coming back. He's saying, your character is good. I'm showing you a lot of good things about you, but there needs to be stability. And I was teaching in weeks and months past is that when a person accepts Yeshua as the Messiah, they're not really stable at that point. And the reason why they're not really stable at that point is because they still have not yet learned and identified what is sin. As Shaul was talking about, that is the second phase of your walk. What is sin? Sin is the transgression of law, 1 John 3:4. Therefore, the person needs to go from accepting Yeshua and having salvation into the next phase, which is identifying what is sin, which is diligent study of Torah. Diligent study of what Yeshua is explaining from Torah. Okay? And then as you grow in that, then what happens is you start to become stable. And the reason why you're becoming stable is because you're now being given weapons. You're being given armor. You're putting on the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, and all this armor is being pieced onto you, and it's being layered on in such a way that the enemy is having a harder time seducing you into transgressing the Torah, because before, when you're in your ignorance, you didn't know you were transgressing. Now that you're studying the Torah and you're seeing why you shouldn't do this particular thing, he can't use it against you anymore. And now you have the will and the mind of Yeshua to say, no, I am not going to go that way. So now stability starts to come into your life, because the enemy can't turn your life upside down as easily as he could before. This is what he's getting to. And built up in him and established through being confirmed in the faith, as you have been taught, abounding in it with thanksgiving. And so it's not real clear here, but basically once you get through phase 2, which is identifying what sin is and weeding it out of your life, and you're getting into that stability stage, now you start to become established and being confirmed. And the confirmation of the gospel is signs, wonders, and miracles starting to follow you, because you're now putting on the divine nature, the full divine nature of Yeshua in your life, and you're now starting to see things manifest in your life that you didn't see before. This is the progression of what goes on in our walk. In verse 8, beware with perception, lest anyone cheat, as leading you away as booty by seduction. And this is not Beyonce booty kind of stuff. So this is booty. In other words, these are treasures and so forth, okay? By seduction of you through philosophy. Now I want to stop here. This is where Christianity gets into a lot of trouble. They love Colossians chapter 2, starting in verse 8 on downward, because what they like to say is, you see, us Christians, we should not allow anybody come and tell us that they should be able to judge us in regards to food and drink and Sabbaths and new moon celebrations and so forth. Don't let anybody judge you and tell you you have to keep those things. Here's the real nuts and bolts of what's really going on. That ideology didn't even exist at the time that Shaul was writing this. So let's go on. Beware with perception, lest anyone cheat, as leading you away as booty by seduction of you through philosophy. And the word philosophy means Jewish sophistry. This has nothing to do with Christians. This wasn't written about Christians. This is the Jewish society at the time, as I've already talked about before, these peripheral groups. And sophistry means a clever but misleading reasoning. I'm sure a lot of you have all experienced somewhere in your life where somebody has come to you and you had a preconceived notion about a particular subject, and they start telling you how it's not that way, that it's really this way, and you're listening to you saying, that really sounds good. It sounds so good that I'm willing to discard what I formerly believed about this subject. That's how good it really sounds. But it's really misleading reasoning, because it's based on a wrong premise. But if you don't know what that premise is from the other person, you don't know you're actually being undermined. And again, as Shaul was talking about, is about being steadfast. It's about being grounded. When you're grounded, no Tom, Dick, and Harry can come around you and pull you away so easily. And I've seen a lot of Tom, Dick, and Harrys come along and they try to spin me some stuff. I'm like, bro, you better get up earlier in the morning and come at me with something else, because I ain't buying it. This fish isn't biting the bait on the hook. That's nonsense. But, people think that they get all these kinds of revelations, that they're in the Spirit and they get these revelations. And it's a bunch of hogwash. Because the revelation you're getting is from the enemy, because I know that's not from Yeshua and it's not from Torah, and it can't be substantiated from Scripture, period. So let's move on. And empty deceit that deludes. According to the tradition, and the word tradition means Jewish Talmudic law. Now, you ain't going to have Christianity tell you this. But that word tradition means Jewish Talmudic law. That's what it means specifically. So here we go again. Shaul's telling them, don't let these Jewish people come to you. They're not believers. They're the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they're all these other peripheral groups, the Herodians. They're all coming in with their own all kinds of ideologies based upon their Talmudic traditions, and they all see Talmud just a little bit different from each other, but it all is their main source. And they're coming in trying to feed you this nonsense from Talmud, trying to convince you of something other than what you learned from the beginning from Yeshua when you accepted Him. And so they want to muddy the waters of men according to the basic principles arranged for and of the world. Get that. Talmudic law was arranged for and of the world. This is not of Yeshua. But yet so many in Messianic Judaism and even in Nazarene Israel are mixing Talmudic law in with our faith. I spoke at the Feast of Tabernacles about keeping our faith pure and not allowing all this stuff from the outside to come in and water down who Yeshua really was and what He stood for and the work He's trying to do in us. And this is what their goal is. Talmudic law was made for and of the world, not for Yeshua. We came out of that stuff. We're not supposed to be going back into it and mixing it. And not according to Messiah, as Shaul is stating here. It has nothing to do with Messiah. But we got people today who claim they have the Messiah, and they say, oh, but I read something in the Talmud that I think is useful. We're going to bring it in. What? Shaul says it's not a Messiah. Why are you bringing it in when he says it's not a Messiah? And so that's their excuse for saying, oh, Paul, he's off his rocker. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's schizophrenic. One minute he's for Torah, next minute he's against it. You never know what he's talking about. He's crazy. Well, if that was the case, how come all the other apostles didn't denounce him? They gave him the right arm of fellowship, didn't they? Well, clearly, if they were against Shaul and they thought he was off his rocker, somewhere in the other epistles we should see the apostles denouncing Paul in his writings. But we don't see that. But today that's a very common thing that we got in the body. Here is the covenant of Hagar. It is of the flesh because it is of the world. This is what Paul's saying in plain language. This is of the flesh because it's of the world. That's where Talmudic law came from. They didn't have the Ruach when they came up with Talmud. If they had the Ruach, they wouldn't have had the Talmud in the first place. Because the Spirit that leads in all truth would never have led them to write all those crazy doctrines that's in the Talmud or in Judaism. Verse 9, for in Him dwells to the house of permanently all the fullness of the divinity or Godhead bodily. So in other words, what he's saying is that the fullness of what Yeshua possesses, He houses it and it dwells within Him. It doesn't dwell in these other groups where these ideologies are trying to feed you. If you want that, you got to go to Him. If you want that stuff, then you go and deal with those people, and then you can have that mixed bag. Verse 10, and you are complete in Him. See, so he's telling you, don't need these other groups. You're already complete. You already got everything you could possibly need. Don't let this stuff come in and water down what you've already been given. Who is the head of all principality. Now he asserts this even more to an even higher level of authority. Of principality, which are physical rulers, are political leaders, in other words. And power, which is of spiritual rulers. In other words, demonic. So what he's saying is, you're already complete. And He's the head of all these things because He's the one who created them all. He's the one who decides who goes into the White House. You can pull the lever on the voting machine if you want to. If you want to get into the imperial cults, as I talked about in Galatians, if you want to be involved with politics, get into the imperial cults and worship the political leaders. I'm not saying disrespect them. No, not that. Pray for them, that they do the right thing. But the bottom line is Yahweh's the one, or Yeshua, put them into power in His own infinite wisdom, of which we don't know why He does that. And of spiritual rulers, He allows various demons to be in control over various countries of the world. And under those demons are sub-demons who are assigned certain responsibilities, probably to rule over the imperial cults, which is the political leadership, and instill political ideologies that are anti-Torah, that cause pandemonium in society. This is what we got going on now, like with homosexuality and abortion, just to be blunt right out there in the open. These are things that our political leaders instituted, which are anti-Torah. This comes from the enemy. This comes from unclean spirits, these principalities in spiritual places who rule over these humans who are not being governed by the Ruach, like we are, and they make these policies that demoralize society. And we have to deal with the consequences of that. And actually what we're seeing now is those who are standing up for righteousness, and I'll include Christianity in that, who are standing up for righteousness are being beaten down by these politicians because of the unclean spirits that are working through them to demoralize them and bring them under subjection. Let's move on. Shaul here reaffirms again that everything you need is in Yeshua, and you do not need to consult those who promote the fleshly covenant of Hagar, which dilutes the righteousness of Yeshua. We must keep the righteousness of Yeshua pure, undefiled, uncompromised. It is our job to do that, but we need to understand what that is. Because these other groups want to come in and tell you, no, you just need to put this in there. If you put this in the recipe, in the equation, then you got everything. Then Yeshua is everything. No, 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 no. I don't need that stuff. It might be interesting to know, might be interesting to study, but I don't need that in my life to somehow authenticate Yeshua in me. Verse 11. In Him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, by putting and divesting, removing off the body of sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Messiah. So in other words, while we were uncircumcised in heart or even in the flesh, when Yeshua visited us, like I remember Pedro was saying, he was in a Presbyterian church and Yahweh revealed His name to him. He got a visitation. He's not going to learn that stuff in a Presbyterian church. Okay? But at that moment, he was circumcised in the heart. Long before anything in the flesh or anything else. So you can't claim anything in the flesh supersedes that event when it happened to him. That's the circumcision without hands. Man cannot claim any glory of that circumcision because it's not accomplished by man. Verse 12, buried with Him in baptism, which is the next phase you would have gone through after you're circumcised in the heart, in which you were also raised, roused from the dead with Him through faith in working of efficient energy of Yahweh who raised Him from the dead. Verse 13, and you, being dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, He has made alive together with Him, having forgiven, graciously pardoned you of all trespasses. So clearly here it's stating that, again, is that they were uncircumcised. The Colossians were uncircumcised at the moment they were called. And actually the word the uncircumcision, I believe in the Greek, well, I think I got it here. Let me see here. Here it is, akrabustia. Means unregenerate. It's the prepuce of the man's genitals. It means not to be circumcised. And it's an unregenerate state of a person. And there's some other word meaning in akrabustia. It also, I don't remember where it is, but it also means the tossed away foreskin ones. The tossed away foreskin ones. And what that means basically, when you're dealing with the Colossians and the Galatians, Ephesians and all these are basically the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They have Hebraic blood in them. They just didn't know it because they were living as Gentiles. They were living as uncircumcised. And they were called in that state. Okay, verse 14. Having wiped out the handwriting from a legal document, which is Talmudic law. Having wiped out the handwriting from a legal document of Talmudic law. So he basically is saying he wiped out Talmudic law. It's wiped out. I've wiped it out. Through this process, I wiped it out. Of requirements of civil, ceremonial, or ecclesiastical sources. That was against and planted covertly towards us. Which was contrary to us. Remember what I said about it being of the world? We read a few verses back. It's of the world. It's fleshly. That's what Talmudic law is. And it was planted covertly. Not by man, but by the principalities in spiritual places. Religious spirits who use the carnal mind of man to conjure up all kinds of philosophies that deceive humans and delude them through clever reasoning. This is where Shaul is going. And it was planted covertly against us. In other words, Satan knew that something was going to happen, and he implemented these things so that when the Messiah came on the scene, the Messiah would have all these enemies he would have to fight. Satan is a master strategist. He knows exactly how to set us up long before we've even figured out we've been set up. That was against us and planted covertly towards us, which was contrary to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. Verse 15, having disarmed by divesting himself wholly the principalities, both who are physical rulers and the powers who are spiritual. He made a public spectacle by exhibiting of them, triumphing with victory over them in it. Verse 16, so let no one judge mentally or judiciously to the point of punishment of you in food and meat, or in drink, or an act of drinking. And I think that's important because much of the traditions of the elders, what they took up issue with is the ritual and how they did the eating and drinking. And that's why that's in there. Or regarding a festival or a new moon festival or Sabbaths, and that one means weekly Sabbaths. Yeshua was constantly reprimanded for not following the traditions of the elders in food and in drink. Let's take a look. In Matthew chapter 15, verses 2 through 11, it says, why do your disciples transgress the tradition, Jewish Talmudic law of the elders? This would have been the Pharisees. For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. So clearly right here, this is a tie-in to what that's talking about in Colossians. Verse 3, he answered and said to them, why do you also transgress the commandment of Yahweh because of your tradition of Jewish Talmudic law? Here we are. We're not told this in the English because the Greek translators wouldn't put it in like that, but that's what it says in the Greek. Jewish Talmudic law. Verse 4, for Yahweh commanded, saying, honor your father and your mother, and he who curses or speaks evil of father and mother, let him be put to death. You are not allowed to do that. So woe to those who are offspring of mother and fathers, not to speak evil of mother and father. But you say, whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might receive from me is a gift offering to Yahweh. Verse 6, then he need not honor his father or mother. That's the Korban thing we talked about, I think, last year. Thus you have made the commandment of Yahweh of no effect through disannulment. Through disannulment by your tradition of Jewish Talmudic law. Now, when I had taught, I think it was earlier in Colossians, in chapter 1, it escapes me right now, it's kind of a blur, but there was some wording used in there that basically said that when you, now this is in Galatians study, that when you accepted the covenant of Hagar, you were immediately cut off from Yeshua. Immediately severed. Immediately. I mean, there's no waste of time. At the minute, particularly where I was talking about it back then, is if a man decides to get circumcised by pariah circumcision, which is according to Talmudic law, it's not the Torah circumcision. At the moment a man cuts his genitals in that way and draws blood, he has now made a covenant of Hagar, which is a covenant of flesh. And at that moment, if a believer does that, whether physically or spiritually, out of your mouth or physically, you are immediately cut off from Yeshua. Because Yeshua is not going to allow his name and his covenant to be mixed with a fleshly covenant. You got one or the other. This is what it goes back to in the book of Revelation when we're reading about the Laodiceans. You're either cold or hot. One or the other. So you got to go buy gold and refine it in fire. You're going to have to prove to me you're either this or you're that. You're either going to stick with the covenant of Hagar, in other words, or you're going to stick with the covenant of Yeshua. But you can't have both. You can't straddle the fence. So they do this through disannulment by your tradition of Jewish Talmudic law. So when you start letting Talmudic law or any other man's philosophies that's not from Yeshua or from the Torah, if you allow it to creep in and you start mixing it, you are annulling your covenant with Yeshua. Pure and simple. Hard words, harsh words, but this is what Paul's trying to convey to them. They've got to have a take no prisoner mentality. You cannot be flirting around with these other ideologies. Stop it. Get focused, get clear, get passionate, and anoint your eyes with eye salve that you're going to be able to see what's spiritually wrong here. Hypocrites. Well did Isaiah prophesy about you, saying, these people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips. So he even says that when they say, praise be the name of Yeshua, praise be the name of Yahweh, they are honoring his name when they say that. So there's nothing wrong with that. But as pouring out of water. In other words, you see people sometimes, they run in their mouth. I run my mouth a lot. But when people run their mouth praising Yahweh, praise Yeshua, you know, it's like water just spewing out of their mouth. This is the context of the word with their lips. But their heart is far from me as a great distance. A great distance. And in vain, in an unsuccessful search, they worship me. So they're searching for him, but they can't find him. And it's unsuccessful. Teachings as doctrines and commandments of men. Verse 10, when he had called the multitude to himself, he said to them, hear and understand. Not what goes into the mouth defiles and profanes a man, but what comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. I've said it this way. Eating a ham sandwich does not defile you. Truly. If you want to understand what Yeshua is trying to get across and what he's saying, eating a ham sandwich does not defile you. You are already defiled long before the sandwich hit your mouth. Long before. Why? Because it's the desire for the ham sandwich that made you and compelled you to go fix that sandwich and then eventually eat it. But you are already defiled in your heart for the craving for that which is not desirable by Yahweh, which is actually an abomination, and it's that which Yeshua is going to consume all those who are eating ham sandwiches when they return. Go read Isaiah 66. Continuing in Colossians verse 17, which are a shadow of things to come, but the substance of them is in Messiah Yeshua. So we keep the feast days, we keep the new moon, we keep, we eat the kind of foods that we do. Why? Because these are all a shadow of things that are going to be fulfilled by Yeshua. And what the shadow does is it shows us the actual image of the one who's casting the shadow. But if you resist the shadow pictures of the Word, then it's hard to see who the Yeshua really is. And so we need those shadows so that we can see the actual image. Verse 18, let no one cheat you of your reward of salvation, taking delight in false humility. That humiliates your mind. So he's saying false humility actually humiliates your mind. That's what it means in the Greek. And worship the ceremonial observance of angels, intruding by looking into those things which he has not seen. Now let's stop here for a minute. What is he saying? What he's saying is that there are people around who are coming in who are telling you that the worshiping of angels is okay. And the reason why they want to worship angels is because those angels will reveal things to them that is not known to mankind. And that's an abomination, because that's worship. And they actually go through a ceremonial observance or some kind of a ritual in summoning these angels to get this special revelation out. This is what Kabbalah does. Kabbalah does this, okay? And intruding by looking into those things which he has not seen. So what he's saying is, there are some in these fellowships that have a desire to see things in the spirit realm that Yeshua has not yet shown them. And because it's kind of like because Yeshua's not shown me this yet, this sounds pretty good. These guys are getting revelation over here through this way, through worshiping of angels. Let me go over there and see what kind of revelations they got. So they go over there and they see supernatural spiritual manifestations, and they're like, oh, this is incredible. Now they're caught. They've been deluded. They've been carried away. And then they've lost their salvation, as it says here, because that's a covenant of flesh. It's the Hagar covenant, which leads to failure and causes one to be puffed up with pride by his fleshly mind. So clearly, it's back to the fleshly mind again. This is the covenant of Hagar. Now, let's go into the book of Enoch just for a little bit, because there's two basic issues that I want to pick a bone with. For one is, talking about these ideologies, we have so much arguments going on now with the calendar. And we got so many different philosophies of calendar now, my head is spinning. I mean, I'm hearing almost every couple of days or every week some new crazy concept of that. And all this stuff is coming in because Christians are coming out of the church into the Hebraic roots, which is great. But instead of studying what Torah says, they're bringing the book of Enoch in and they're corrupting the faith. And they're carrying people away. And so a lot of the calendar issues, if you look at them, stem from the book of Enoch. Now, here's what I want to say. The oldest manuscripts that we have of Enoch really are bits and pieces that come from the Essenes, from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which goes to about right around 300 BC, somewhere in there. Nothing older than that, okay? Now, I was looking at this for a minute. I'm thinking, they're claiming that Enoch wrote the book of Enoch. Now, Enoch was the seventh from Adam, and I think he was the grandfather of Noah, or great-grandfather, something like that. The only way that I could see that the book of Enoch could have made it through all the way to this side of the flood is Noah would have had to carry the book of Enoch with him onto the ark. I don't see anything in Scripture, in the Torah or the Tanakh or anywhere else, that alludes to the fact that Noah preserved the book of Enoch that was handed to him by Enoch before he was taken, and that he brought it into the ark and it got carried down and assimilated into Hebraic society. Don't see that. And if anybody can prove that to me, then I'll have to completely change my whole philosophy on the book of Enoch. But I wanted to say that because this is where all this calendar nonsense is coming from. And it's because these people don't want to be schooled by long-time Torah teachers, and they want to come up with all these crazy stuff because they think it just puffs them up in the flesh is what it's doing. That they've got some great revelation. But what I really want to get back to here is this central theme here that we're really talking about in the book of Colossians, is this worshiping of angels. Let's take a look at some of this stuff here that I pulled from the book of Enoch just to get an idea. Araquel, also known as Arakiel, Araquel, Arsael, all these different names. Sarquel, Arkiel, Arcus taught humans the signs of the earth. However, in Sibylline oracles, Araquel is referred to not as a fallen angel or a watcher, but one of the 5 angels who led the souls of men to judgment, the other 4 being Remiel, Uriel, Simiel, and Azazel. Amaros, also Amaros, in Enoch 1 taught men the resolving of enchantments. So clearly, these angels they're proclaiming in Enoch are responsible for these particular events. Azazel taught men to make knives, swords, shields, and how to devise ornaments and cosmetics. Gadriel taught the art of cosmetics, the use of weapons and killing bows. It was he who led Eve astray in the Garden of Eden. Barakel taught men astrology. Bezaleel, mentioned to Enoch 1, in Enoch 1, left out of most translations because of damaged manuscripts and problematic transmissions of the text. Chezekiel, sometimes Ezekiel or Gabriel, taught men the signs of the clouds or meteorology. Kokabiel, also Kakabiel or Kokabiel and whatever, in the book of Raziel, is a high-ranking holy angel. In Enoch 1, he is a fallen watcher, resident of the nether realms, and commands 365,000 surrogate spirits to do his bidding. Among other duties, he instructs his fellows in astrology. Pinanumu taught mankind the art of writing with ink and paper, and taught the children of men the bitter and the sweet and the secrets of wisdom. Sariel taught mankind about the courses of the moon, at one time regarded as forbidden knowledge. Samayaza is one of the leaders of the fallen from heaven in vocabulaire. I can't pronounce it. I don't know what that is. I didn't look that up. Shamasiel wants a Garden of Eden, as stated in Zohar. That's another peripheral book similar to Enoch. Served as one of the two chief aides to the archangel Uriel, the other aide being Hazadiel, when Uriel bore his standard into battle and is head of 365 legions of angels, and also crowns prayers accompanying them to the fifth heaven. I find that interesting because nowhere in Scripture do we have a fifth, sixth, and seventh heaven, or even a fourth. In Jubilee, in Enoch, it talks about 7 heavens. In Jubilees, he is referred to as one of the watchers. He is a fallen angel who teaches the sign of the sun. Ucjohn was the ringleader who first tempted the other watchers who, having sexual relations with humans, his accomplices were Abzbiel, Gadriel, Pinanu, and Kasdae, who were all identified as individual Satans. Okay, so the question is, why did I bring that up? Why I brought it up is because going back to what Paul was talking about in Colossians is this angel worship. If you can see some of, I know we put a few things here, some of the things that these angels supposedly have knowledge of and impart to humans is the luring force. So I've seen people where they follow Yeshua and they need or crave or desire something in their life from Yeshua, but Yeshua doesn't give it to them for reasons unbeknown. Okay? He doesn't give it to them. So what happens is they get frustrated and they go outside Yeshua and they go seek it somewhere else. This is the same kind of typical thing that goes on in the body of Messiah and what he's conveying here in the book of Colossians. There's an allure to have all this interesting knowledge that you're not getting from Yeshua by himself. So that's why I put that in here to show how compelling this all is. So in verse 19 it says, "And not holding by retaining fast to the head, from whom all the body, nourished and knit together by joints and ligaments, grows with the increase that is from Yahweh." So what he's saying is, if you stay attached to the body, over a period of time, if you exercise patience and self-control, what's going to happen is, you're going to have these things that you're seeking be imparted to you in their pureness of revelation, and not with the way these unclean spirits are trying to impart it to you. But it requires patience and it requires self-control and not seeking these other sources for enlightenment. Verse 20, "Therefore, if you died with Messiah from the basic principles and arranged for and of the world." So here we are back again. These other philosophies and these other ideologies, in other words, the worshiping of angels that we just talked about, were prearranged for and of the world. They were not arranged for us. But they're there to seduce us if we get frustrated with Yeshua because we're not progressing along the path as fast as we would like to. Why, as though living in the world, do you subject yourself to regulations, a prescribed statute, so as to submit to a ceremonial law? So this goes back to what we were reading in Matthew when the Pharisees were coming at Yeshua saying, "Why do you not clean your hands? Why do you not clean the bowls? Why do you not do these rituals the way we have designed them from Talmudic law?" And so these things are, he's basically saying, why are you submitting yourself? Why are you allowing these guys to come in and tell you, oh, when you keep the feast days, you need to do it like this, the way it's written in Talmud. Don't let them judge you in these things. Yeshua's already explained to you how we're prescribed to do these things. So in verse 21 it says, do not touch as to attach oneself to. Do not taste to experience good or ill. Do not handle to have anything to do with. So these are the mantras that are come from Talmudic Judaism that are being perpetuated on the New Testament believers, the Colossians, and they're telling them not to be doing these things, which all concern things which perish with the using. That's because it's of the flesh. Everything you do in this flesh is going to perish with the using in this context by consumption, according to the commandments and doctrines of men. These things indeed have an appearance, as they state, of wisdom. So this is one of the things that they're telling them. Come over here. Come over here. If you just come over here, I'm going to show you how these angels can reveal things to you. And it will give you this wisdom that you're seeking that you're not getting over there. This completes the whole thing. If you'll just come over here, you'll get this impartation. And they're telling you, they state it, of wisdom and in self-imposed sanctimonious worship of religion. False humility, which is humiliation really of the mind. And neglect of the body, but are of no value against the indulgence and gratification of the flesh. So I hope that this helps you understand a little bit more of the paradox that Shaul had in dealing with the Colossians, how these groups are coming in and really causing havoc with the Colossians. And unfortunately, he wasn't there in person to be able to protect them. So they're like unprotected sheep. And so with that, let's go ahead and close in prayer, all right? Shaul was a great teacher, Abba, and we thank you for bringing his teachings to us. And I thank you, Yahweh, for revealing some of this inside information of what was in his heart and the frustrations of what he had in dealing with the Colossians and the Galatians and all the rest of them. And Yahweh, I just pray that these words here today will sink into our hearts, into our souls, and into our minds, and to help us to be on guard of how the enemy is trying to come into the body of Messiah and try to take salvation away from people by having them to cut the covenant of Hagar, that fleshly covenant that cannot coexist with Yeshua. And that your people will come to a point, Yahweh, where they'll really understand the difference between the covenant of Hagar and the covenant of Yeshua, and that they cannot be mixed together. And so, Yahweh, we bless you and we thank you for the Sabbath day. We thank you for the rest. We thank you for the fellowship. We thank you for your word. And most of all, we thank you for your Ruach HaKodesh.